Hello, Greek students, and I don't know what you are doing tonight on this Friday night before Thanksgiving, but my wife is at a play with my son and daughter-in-law, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to record a Greek lecture. So here we are. We are starting a new section. We are leaving behind nouns, adjectives, prepositions. We're leaving those behind for a little while, and we're going to start into Greek verbs, um, which is probably my favorite part. This next couple of lectures is probably my favorite part of Greek. But what we're going to do in this lecture is we're going to spend some time kind of revisiting English grammar, just so that you sort of refamiliarize yourself with the principal parts of an English verb. And then we're going to introduce Greek verbs just generally, the parts of the verb, what we're going to be looking for when we parse and translate the verb. That's all we're doing now. No new vocabulary. I mean, we'll cover a couple of Greek verbs, but not so that you remember them in this lecture, just so that we can show you some examples. But no new vocabulary, no parsing or paradigms rather. Just this is just a grammar lesson. So let's get started looking at looking at English grammar. The English verb. A verb is a word that communicates action. I love my Greek class. Love would be the verb in that sentence, and it's an action. It's a state of being. So you have to be verbs, right? Is. Greek is the heavenly language. So you have verbs that indicate a state of being. And there are three parts to a verb. There is present, we're going to call them tense in Greek, but you have present verbs. I eat, I was eating, I will eat. You have past, I ate. You have what we call past perfect. I have eaten, I was eaten. If you get out in the woods with me and an animal gets you, then you say, I was eaten. And so just so that you kind of keep up with what we're doing. We're talking about the various aspects of a verb. So you have past, present, and past perfect. And then you also have person. You have first person, second person, third person. So first would be I or we, second would be you. Third would be he, she, it, or they. So you have person, you have number. So in verbs, you have singular or plural. And then you have agreement. A verb must always agree with its subject in person and number. You can review that in section 15.6 in your textbook. So the time in an English verb refers to the past, the present, and the future. Tense in English refers to both the time when the action of the verb takes place and the form of the verb. And we'll get into this in Greek and you'll see what we're talking about. But just remember that when you're talking about time, that is from the standpoint of the speaker, not the hearer. It has nothing to do with reality. It has nothing to do with whether the thing is actually true or not. It's just from the perspective of the speaker. So you have present, past, past perfect. You have person, number. A verb must agree with its subject in person and number. You have tense, which is referring to both the time when the action takes place and the form of the verb. And time is always from the aspect of the speaker or from the standpoint of the speaker. Then you have aspect. And so aspect refers to the kind of action that you might see. So I'm just going to kind of read from your textbook because I think Mounce does a really good job of 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 breaking it down and using a good example. So aspect refers to the kind of action. It is not the same as tense, although it is related to it. What is the difference between saying I studied last night and I was studying last night? Well, I studied last night says that an event happened last night. It doesn't give a clue as to the precise nature of your study time other than it was accomplished. And so, and so, what you have in verbs is you have various kinds of aspect. So if you say I studied last night, that is the perfective aspect. Usually in English, the perfective aspect is formed by using just the simplest form of the verb. I eat. I ate. The other aspect is the imperfect aspect, which is a continuous action. I was studying last night. I was studying indicates a more continuous action than I studied. So if you were to say I ate, then what you're communicating is that in a specific point in time, not a specific point in time, but at some point you ate and you probably finished, right? So you ate, you did the thing, and then you weren't doing the thing, right? But if you say I was studying last night, then you could mean I studied all night, or I studied and I stopped and I studied and I stopped and I studied. But the point is, it's continuous action. So you have perfective and imperfective. In English, imperfective is formed with helping words. I am eating or I was eating. And here is aspect as it relates to the different times. So you see the top row, you have perfective. I study, I studied, I will study. Those are all finite actions. I study, I studied, I will study. But the imperfective stretches that action out over time. I was studying, I was studying, I will be studying. So you also have perfective and punctiliar. Those are the two different actions that you're going to see as we move forward. You're going to see action that occurs in a single point in time, that's punctiliar, and you're going to see perfective, which could be punctiliar, but not necessarily. So in English, you have perfective and imperfective. But what you're going to see when we start going through the Greek verbs is you're going to have perfective and punctiliar. Perfective could be punctiliar, but not necessarily. Context and exegesis will help make that distinction. I don't want you to get, the reason I'm moving so fast is because this is just an overview, and I don't want you to get wrapped around the axle on some of this, because what you're going to discover is that every time you learn a new Greek paradigm, like present active indicative, which is the first paradigm we're going to learn, you're going to learn how to translate present active indicative in a sentence, whether you know this or not. Where this is going to help you is if you find yourself in graduate school taking third year Greek, where instead of spending all your time in a textbook, you're going to be spending your time in the New Testament, translating New Testament. And so then you're expanding sort of your understanding of the various verbs. So I don't want you to get wrapped around the axle. I just want you to know that this is kind of a part of it. So in English, you also have voice, right? You have active, which means the subject is doing the action. You have passive, the subject is receiving the action. So you have voice, you have mood, and we'll get into that with the Greek verbs. But indicative mood, which is the first mood we're going to talk about in Greek, it describes something that is as opposed to something that might be. So that is a 30,000-foot view of English verbs. Now, a lot of this, even though you maybe can't verbalize it into, a succinct rule or a specific rule, because you speak English, you understand how to use verbs, even if you can't put your finger on the specific rule. But since we're studying a language that you don't know, we have to make sure that we kind of understand the various parts so that it helps with translation. So that is an overview of English grammar. So let's talk about Greek verbs and what you can expect to see when you're learning Greek verbs. And some of this is going to look similar to the noun in terms of the parts. So in a Greek verb, you're going to have the stem, the tense stem. You're going to have a connecting vowel, and you're going to have personal endings. Now, some of your verbs later on in the semester are going to have suffixes and prefixes. You'll see a letter or letters at the beginning of the verb and at the end. So what you need to really focus on when you're learning your verbs is to learn that stem so that you can recognize it. Because we're going to learn present active indicative in the next lecture. If you learn the verb as present active indicative, first person singular, again, all this is going to make sense in a little bit, then you're not going to be able to translate some of the verbs later in the semester. So just keep in mind that a Greek verb has, at least 3, sometimes 4 parts. It has a stem, a connecting vowel, and a personal ending. Later on, it'll have a prefix, a stem, a connecting vowel, and a personal ending. Here is an example of what that means. So you have the word I hear or I am hearing, akuo. Think of the word acoustics. That's going to be one of your vocabulary words probably next week. Akuo means I hear. The stem is alpha, kappa, omicron, ako, or aka. The connecting vowel is the upsilon, and the personal ending is the omega. So when you're learning your Greek verbs, if you learn it as akuo, then later on, some of the verb formations are going to throw you for a loop because because it may drop that alpha or it may change that upsilon. There may be some changes. So I just want you to make sure that you remember it in a way that is the easiest for you. In fact, aka, alpha, kappa, omicron, means hear, H-E-A-R, hear. So akuo means I am hearing or I hear. Now, I learned present active indicative, and we'll go over it again. We'll go over it in the next lecture, but I didn't learn when I was in college and graduate school. I didn't learn akuo as I am hearing. I learned it as I hear, but we're adding that I am hearing or you hear. So we're adding that so that's new for me to try to remember that. But you see here that you have the personal endings that reflect the various forms of akuo. Akuo, I hear, akuase, you hear, akue, he, she, or it hears, akuomen, akuamen, we hear, akuete, you hear, and akuusi, they hear. You're going to see this paradigm a lot. You'll see these words a lot. And here's just showing you acouomen. When you're parsing a Greek verb, you have to remember a few more things than when you were doing nouns. Take the word legate. Um, when you are parsing out verbs, and you're going to parse them the way that you did nouns, every sentence, you're going to parse every word so that you can accurately translate every word. You're going to keep phrases together. Remember, we did all that in that last supplemental lecture. But when you're parsing, you're going to make sure you're going to focus on person, number, tense, void, and mood. So see, that's a lot, but you'll get used to it really quickly. Person, number, tense, void, and mood, tense, voice, and mood. The lexical form in the noun is always a nominative singular, right? The lexical form in the Greek verb is always the present active indicative, unless present active indicative does not exist for that verb. But we're not going to get there for a while. But the lexical form and then the inflected meaning. So you've already learned Lego, which means I say, or I am saying. You've already learned that vocabulary word. So if you go back here, you see legate. This is actually, even though it's not listed here, this is actually second person plural. So let's go back to legate. So if you were to parse legate, you would say that is second person plural, present active indicative, from Lego, meaning you say, you are saying. And again, you're not to memorize that this lecture. This is just to introduce how you're going to do it so that when we get to the next lecture, it won't be the first time that you see it. So there is a feature of Greek verbs called aspect, and this is in section 15.19 that I encourage you to go there and read it. But just know that when we're referring to aspect in Greek, and you may hear me say that, or you may hear Dr. Mounce, you may read that in the textbook. There are three different aspects, but we're only going to deal with two for now. It's going to be a long time before we introduce that third aspect. So right now, there are two aspects that we're going to deal with, and you've already seen this because we covered it just a few minutes ago in English. We're going to think about the perfective aspect of a Greek verb. That is a simple event. I ate. And we're going to focus on the imperfective aspect. Ongoing process. I am eating. Remember the illustration a few minutes ago? I studied. I am studying. Perfective, imperfective. So we talked about verbs in form of their agreement. They have to agree in case and number, the tense, the time, aspect, the voice, the mood, the root, and the stem. So you can see Lego, I say. So really, leg means say. So you have the stem, the connecting vowel, the personal ending. Later on in the semester, you'll have some of your verb forms will have a prefix, the stem, the connecting vowel, and then they'll have the suffix or the personal ending. So that is an introduction to Greek verbs. This is just an FYI to just give you a brief orientation. And what we're going to do in the next lecture is we're going to introduce the present active indicative verb. And you're going to see your sentence translation, those exercises, you'll see them really pop. Because once you start learning the verbs, you're going to see that Dr. Mounce is going to start throwing more biblical passages into the exercises, so that what you're doing is you're actually translating the biblical text, which is exciting, which is why you're doing this. So hopefully this helps provide a foundation for verbs and an introduction to Greek verbs. And I look forward to seeing you in the next lecture, where we will talk about present active indicative. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll see you soon.